Everyone has an opinion on Cristiano Ronaldo. The goals, the records, the trophies, the body that defied biology for 2 straight decades. But strip all of that away and sit with this one uncomfortable question. What actually happens to a man who has spent his entire life being the best in the world? The moment the world starts moving on without him. Because that moment is not coming. It is already here, and how Ronaldo responds to it will define the final chapter of the most obsessively documented career in the history of sport. To understand the weight of what we are watching unfold, you have to understand what Ronaldo still represents right now, even at this stage of his career. He is the most followed human being on Instagram, full stop, not the most followed athlete. The most followed person on the entire platform has over 900 million followers. Al Nassr games that would have been completely invisible to global audiences 3 years ago now generate international headlines simply because he is in the starting lineup. Brands still pay extraordinary sums for his endorsement. His name still sells shirts, fills stadiums, and dominates sports news cycles on days when he does absolutely nothing of note. The commercial machine Ronaldo built around himself over 2 decades of relentless self-promotion and equally relentless performance is still running at a remarkable speed. But here's the thing about machines. Without the right fuel, even the most powerful ones eventually start to slow down. The story of how Ronaldo became Ronaldo is one that the football world has told so many times that it risks becoming mythology rather than reality. A skinny kid from Madeira who arrived at Sporting Lisbon with talent so obvious it was almost unfair. Manchester United, Sir Alex Ferguson. The transformation from a flashy winger with too many step-overs into the most complete goal-scoring machine the sport had ever produced. 3 Premier League titles, a Champions League, un Ballon d'Or, then Real Madrid, and everything that followed reached a level that made even his United years look like a warm-up act. 4 Champions League titles, 4 Ballon d'Or in Madrid alone, a goals record at the club that may never be touched. But even during those years of almost supernatural production, the cracks in the foundation were being laid quietly. The relationship with teammates was always complicated by the sheer size of his ego. The dependency on individual brilliance in systems that increasingly demanded collective intelligence. The burning need to be the main character in every single story, every single season, without exception. Those things were manageable when the performances were unchallengeable. They become something else entirely when the performances start to slip. The 2026 World Cup represented Ronaldo's final genuine shot at the one major trophy that has permanently eluded him throughout his entire career. Portugal came into the tournament with genuine quality across the squad. Bruno Fernandes is pulling strings in midfield, recently breaking the record of most assists in a single season of the Premier League, partnered up with 2-time Champions League winners, João Neves and Vitinha, truly making Portugal's midfield one of the best in the competition. In the attack, Rafael Leão is offering genuine pace and creativity in wide areas and a defensive structure that had become increasingly solid under Roberto Martinez. And Ronaldo leading the line, still hungry, still obsessively driven, still capable of moments that reminded you exactly why the argument ever existed in the first place. But the tournament also exposed things that Saudi Arabian football had been quietly concealing from the wider football world for the past 2 years. The sharpness that once made him unplayable in tight spaces has softened. The explosive pace that allowed him to run in behind defences with terrifying regularity is operating at a reduced level that no amount of gym work or physical discipline can fully reverse. He still scored, he still had moments, but Portugal's tournament, however it ultimately concluded, confirmed what the more honest corners of the football world had been saying for some time. The team is better when the system is not entirely constructed around protecting his ego and creating his opportunities. And that brings us to the national team reality that nobody in the Portuguese Football Federation wants to address directly, but everyone can see clearly. Portugal has spent years navigating the genuinely difficult diplomatic challenge of managing a squad full of excellent players around the immovable, emotional and commercial reality of Cristiano Ronaldo. Selections have been questioned. Tactical decisions have raised eyebrows. Young players with enormous potential have had their development shaped around the need to accommodate a player who, by any objective measure, should now be transitioning into a supporting role rather than the leading one. The next generation of Portuguese football talent is extraordinary, and they deserve to find out exactly how good they can be without the entire national team conversation being dominated by one man's legendary but ageing presence. The physical risks attached to what comes next for Ronaldo are significant, and they deserve honest discussion. He has maintained his body to a standard that is genuinely extraordinary, and his dedication to physical conditioning is one of the few things about him that attracts universal admiration, even from his most committed critics. But the science of human aging does not negotiate. Muscle recovery slows. Reaction times reduced by margins that are invisible to the naked eye, but enormous at the elite level. The joints absorb years of punishment that eventually present a bill, regardless of how carefully the maintenance work is done. In Saudi Arabia, playing against a standard that is comfortable rather than challenging, those physical limitations are manageable. The moment he attempts to operate at the highest level of European football again, the gap between what his mind demands and what his body can deliver becomes an entirely different conversation. Al Nassr and the Saudi Pro League situation itself deserves examination beyond the obvious financial narrative. Ronaldo's move to Saudi Arabia was framed in many quarters as a retirement home decision dressed up in record-breaking wage figures. The reality is more complicated than that. He has continued to score at a prolific rate. He has pushed the league's global visibility further than anyone thought possible. But he has also operated in an environment that flatters his remaining qualities while concealing his diminishing ones. The contract structure, the commercial obligations attached to his presence in Saudi football, and the broader Vision 2030 project that his arrival was designed to serve, all create a situation where his exit, whenever it comes, will need to be managed with considerable political and commercial delicacy. This is not simply a footballer choosing his next club. This is a global brand negotiating its next phase with a sovereign nation that paid for the privilege of association. So where does it all go from here? The first path is the dignified conclusion. Ronaldo sees out his time in Saudi Arabia, breaks every goal-scoring record the league has to offer, retires on his own terms, surrounded by the adulation of a fan base that has worshipped him unconditionally in ways that European football stopped doing years ago, and takes his place in the history of the sport with a legacy that is fully and completely secure. The second path is the one his pride will always whisper to him in quiet moments: a return to European football. One last chapter at a club willing to build around his remaining qualities. Sporting Lisbon, where it all began, has been discussed. The emotional logic is undeniable, even if the sporting logic is complicated. The third path is the uncomfortable one: that the desire to keep going outlasts the physical ability to justify it. The goals dry up faster than expected. The final images of his playing career became defined by a stubbornness to accept the inevitable, rather than the brilliance that made him impossible to ignore for 20 years. Here is what is certain though: Cristiano Ronaldo will never quietly disappear. Whatever comes next will be loud, it will be debated, and it will be watched by hundreds of millions of people with equal measures of admiration and scrutiny. The man built his entire existence around never being ignored. He's not about to start now. The only question worth asking is whether the final chapter matches the story that came before it. And knowing Ronaldo, he will spend every remaining day of his career trying to make sure that it does.